Welcome back, everybody. Matt Collins here. We got season one, episode 13 of the cast, Colorado Kayak Fishing Club podcast. Today, we're joined with one of our sponsors. Really, really happy to have him on board here. This is going to be a super educational podcast here. Everyone's really been chatting me up, excited about it. Owner Cougarbaits also has a tackle shack in Buena Vista, Colorado. None other than Max Kaufmann. Max, welcome to the show.
Nice to be on, man. I definitely appreciate it. Like you said, it's going to be an educational episode. I have a lot more to say than just talking about baits. That's definitely just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of cool things. I don't know it all, but I'm just an angler. Trying to get after it every day, right? But we it's there's a lot more to it than just going fishing every day. Especially when you start building baits. You got to think about how they run in the water and how the fish see them. But it's one of those things that we have a very cool fishery up here, and hopefully people can learn something from this and apply it on the water.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, before we get into all of the actual baits and kind of techniques out there, give us a little intro about yourself, how you got started making baits, and then kind of what led you up to, where you are now with actually having a store there, your own storefront, and all the traveling you do with it as well.
Oh man, so I guess it's probably good to say I own a bunch of businesses. I run and own a bunch of businesses, and so my main line of work is log homes. And excuse me, when we were starting our business, I ended up moving to Twin Lakes, and moved to Twin Lakes for about 3 years, and I got kind of fed up with buying junk. That's basically what it was. We have such crappy shops up here, with the few places that you could buy lures at. They just You're just wasting your money. I mean, you buy stuff and they just fall apart because nobody wants to spend good money on those types of things. And it's like people up here are willing to spend the money for good quality stuff because we're in the middle of nowhere. So needless to say, there's not a tackle shop right down the street, and there's nothing worse than having a hot bait and then sure enough, it falls apart on you midday. So it's one of those things that's what made me start tying them, making them myself. Though I would just got so fed up with buying junk. And I used to fish on the BASS and FLW. I did that as a teenager. I fished on competitive circuit for probably 6 or 7 years, and I did that until I got obviously aged out at night at 18. And we fished Tennessee a lot, Dale Hollow in particular.
Yeah.
And we would do, and one of the main baits out there for smallmouth is hair jigs. And so I was like, you know what, man, I can make these. That's no worries. The biggest issue when it comes to starting to make baits is, especially jigs, at that time, there was almost no information online. There was probably one, like, on what materials to use, what are the most durable, things like that, and hell, he even had to start tying the darn things. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And so, I mean, honestly, I still have some of my originals, and they're crude, to say the least. I mean, they're the old, with every art, if you can do so, save your originals to look back on later. It's a big
Yeah.
crazy difference. And it's something that I started doing that, and making them. But what the biggest thing is, without a lot of information, there was one video by a guy that I ended up working with later on. He's a YouTuber. His name's Clayton Schick. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a Canadian guy, does a lot, a big ice fisherman, does a lot of ice fishing videos. He now works with Frostbite. But basically, he had one video on how to tie hair jigs for tiger trout, and so I watched that, and believe it or not, it actually inspired my the jigs that I'm pretty popular. People know me for, and that's these big guys. It actually inspired these big lake trout jigs. And his versions were much smaller, but it it was something that, it was a lot of trial and error. People wonder, why, things, baits cost, especially handmade baits cost as much as they cost. Well, there's a lot of R&D that goes into them, right? I probably spent at least $1,400 in material just figuring out what materials I liked, and going from there, eventually figuring out stuff that works, stuff that doesn't, all of that R&D. We're talking years of time to get stuff exactly as I wanted it. And then eventually, I started making baits for myself, and then buddies liked them, and then it kind of spirals up from there with every trade. As soon as you start doing something, all of your friends see, and you start to get good at something, then all your buddies like it, and then all of a sudden you're just like, shit, I guess I should start an LLC, And well, it wasn't just that; I was also I was selling like lures online for a while, like on Facebook Marketplace and stuff, and on, like Facebook pages and whatnot. And nowadays, that people, those admins really don't like that shit, and like, so they kick you off for that pretty quickly. Sorry for anybody who's trying to do that. That was my fault for getting kicked off. That was definitely, that was me. I was I was selling on those sites, for years, and and I was making a killing doing it, and my business partner, he was like, you're selling enough of these things, you're getting enough orders in on the daily, like, and come, like, for example, Christmas time, I would almost get annoyed looking at my phone because there's a good chance I have an order every 30 minutes.
Jeez.
It was craziness, like, especially around certain times of year. And so we would just, he was like, you just need to start an LLC. And he's like, you're getting all these, all these orders in all the time. There's no reason to not make it official. And I was like, you know what, that's a good point. And so I did. So the heck with it, I'm going to go and do it. And so I, came up with a name, and I actually just picked a name that, that was a nickname of mine and stuff like that. So I came up with the name, and my dad made the logo, and, kind of rocked it from there. But and, ever since there, it's definitely snowballed into something, that is on the verge of potentially being a really, really awesome thing. And with every small business, there's risks, but I'm not afraid of risks. Small. This is a very small risk compared to what we do on a daily basis. So, like, when it comes to, like, starting a tackle company, that's something that, I think is, if you're knowledgeable in something, especially, I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn on it, but if you're knowledgeable or passionate more or less about some topic, and you see holes in the market, and you just sit there and complain about it, not making it any better, are you really helping? So therefore, you should probably try to, make that, industry better by doing something about it. And that's, in my opinion, I wasn't able to find anything that I liked that worked and that was durable. So I said, the hell with it, we're going to make them. I'm going to make these things. And once I figured it out, I was making them for myself, and people loved them because they lasted. And we kind of evolved from there, and now I make baits of all sorts of all sorts of shapes and sizes, and um, I mean, most of the baits in my store, which is called Tackle Shack, as you mentioned before, almost, I would say 70% of everything in my store I make. And I kind of evolved into the store because, you know, um, I used to sell at Shields in Colorado Springs and Johnstown. I know, are they a sponsor of yours now? Yeah, still?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk ill of them, but it's, we just, I got them through the pandemic, and, when you help, through a company through through the pandemic, and, they kind of just shoo you out afterwards. Right. And that's what happened to me. And that's okay. That's business, and so you move on, and, evolve from that. And you're just like, well, the hell with you guys. If you're not going to, keep up with the game, I'm just going to start my own, just like I do every other thing. And so
Sure.
we got the Tackle Shack going, and people are really excited to see it. It's something that, it's not the be all end all when it comes to, bait and tackle shops. And I'm, slowly building every day, over there. We're, building and evolving, and, bringing stuff into the, bringing stuff into the store that, you're not going to find in this state. You're just not going to find it,
Yeah.
and it's, mainly because I'm the only I'm the only store that sells my baits anymore. I'm the only store the only one right now. Not to, but I'm also, like the only one you can buy legitimate musky rods, musky nets, all that stuff you really need to go and chase these big fish. And you should always have a musky size net is in your arsenal, not just for musky. As we were kind of talking about earlier, that's like having fish conservation is such a big deal, and to preserve these fisheries we have out here that are just amazing. It's
Yeah,
something that like if we don't protect them, they're just going to disappear. And
absolutely.
or evolve into a way we may not like.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
we're really lucky out here. It's funny you're talking about Tennessee. I lived out there for 11 years in the Clarksville area. So yeah, I fished Dale Hollow. I live a lot closer to like Lake Barkley, Kentucky Lake. That was kind of my fishing
I,
area. But
I never did Kentucky. I never did, and I regret it. I really wish I could have. I never got. I'm not to say that I won't get a chance
yeah,
again,
so I
but
got out there right before the Asian carp kind of ruined the lake for several years, but it's back on the rise right now. A lot of lakes are kind of coming back. That's one of them. So I would be really um, pressed to see, what Bassmaster looks like there. Maybe going back there in a few years and seeing the bags are pulling out of there. But yeah, so back into these lures, guys. If you haven't seen, I think I saw you on social media or something before I even joined the club because I just moved out here about a year and a half ago, and I had seen like these crazy lures that I really hadn't seen before. I mean, I'd seen pike lures before. I'm from the Midwest, I'm from Illinois. So like that was the big thing going up north for people to catch pike, like you're saying, Wisconsin and
yeah,
Minnesota,
yeah,
but and muskie. But the the stuff you have is it looks like an art. It's an art, man. Some of these lures. So um, what I'll do is I'll move my screen a little bit out of the way, minimize it here, and then I'll let you just talk about maybe like you know what are maybe a few of your go-to lures that people have, and then one of the things I want you to touch on, we talked a little bit about, but your baits are, and they're not all huge. I will say
yeah.
that first off, like there's, um, being a sponsor of the club, I've seen, some of the hair jigs that you've got are small. They're
Yep.
down to like an eighth ounce, probably. Nice small hair jigs. But there's a time for the bigger bite and for the bigger baits. So I'll let you talk that and then some of the lures that you got.
Yeah, so I mean, like kind of like what you were just saying, I don't make only big baits. I love making big baits. That's kind of what, honestly, that's really what gets me amped up. Making small baits is kind of a bummer. I do it, but like just because if I don't, then people won't. If they nonstop asking me for them, so I might as well make them.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, right now I'm selling like 150 trout spinners a month.
Jeez.
And we're talking a Panther Martin sized spinner. My spinners are much different than anything else on the market. They actually make noise. They make a ticking sound, and so that's the big thing with them. They work really well for that reason. But why originally? I mean, what a lot of people know me for really is the hair jigs. That's something where I started doing. The way that one of the main ways I got a following in the beginning was because of the hair jigs, man. Like I would, excuse me, I would go to ice fishing tournaments, and I would set up a booth at ice fishing tournaments, and I would sell baits just kind of grassroots style, and just do that. And I mean, like it would be like for example, I mean this is one of my original patterns, right? This little suckerfish pattern, and that's something that we use all winter long, but you can use those in the summertime too. Like that's a big walleye thing. There's a lot of guys that you like that smallmouth, all that, right? I mean, honestly, that's a great pattern for a spinny. And for guys, I know that's one of the reasons why we're talking right now is the spinny tournament's coming up,
Yeah.
and that's something that like I think that a lot of people should really think about is working. Yeah, I mean, whether you're fishing for pike or trout, like maybe don't hesitate to throw a hair jig. I mean, work it fast. Don't just be bouncing off the bottom. Work it like a jerk bait. Work it really, really erratic and as fast as you can reel that thing. Make it just jolt all over the place, and they destroy. I've hooked some of the biggest trout I've ever seen in my life at Spinney that
Yeah.
I never caught. I've hooked them. Put it that way. That's all I could do to them,
Yeah.
And they just the biggest trout I've ever seen, and it's all coming on baits that are really really fast and really erratic, that type of thing. But in recent years, I've been going bigger, as far as my bait selection goes, because I to go to Spinney, you can just catch a trout, a trout or a pike, like that's pretty simple to do. But if you want after that true trophy, which they do eat smaller baits too, I'm not going to deny they definitely do, but I'm just trying to kind of eliminate the small bites because what kept on happening to me is because I first started using at Spinney when I was learning the lake, I first started using like Booyah spinner baits, the Terminator spinner baits, and Strike Kings, right? And
Yeah.
bass spinner baits. And what would happen is I would hook, all of a sudden a trout would eat them, right? And you would think, oh, well, you're trout fishing. Why would they eat a spinner bait? Like, that's stupid. But, like, they do. They eat them. They eat chatterbaits. They eat spinner baits. They eat crankbaits. They don't just eat bugs. I promise you that,
Yeah. Those
And
trout in there are
different
they're
animals.
animals, man. They just I've had more trout destroy baits of mine in Spinney, probably than pike, honestly.
Yep.
Which is crazy. I
Yep.
mean, you change the hooks sometimes, but golly, that fight on the pike out or the trout out there. I mean, last tournament we did at Spinney, we had I think three guys that had 26-inch trout out there. So
So
they fight.
the thing is like where I was getting at was I was using those store bought spinner baits, and
Yeah,
what would happen is those fish would eat them, and they would jump out of the water, shaking their heads so hard the blades would fly off.
go on. Yeah.
And so I was like, "The hell with this, man!" I was like, as much as I don't want to make spinner baits, I sounds like I'm making spinner baits. And so, like, there's a lot of baits that out there that I make that I'm just like, at first I'm not amped about doing, right? Like, it takes a lot of convincing for me to be like, the hell with them, I'm making them, right? Like, that's what happened with the trout spinners. I wasn't gonna make trout spinners. I was making them for myself, and that was it. And then all of a sudden, my buddy owns the fly shop was like, if you want in my store, you're making these trout spinners. I was like, I guess I'm making trout spinners, like, and he's like, dude, they're gonna sell like crazy. He's like, so you should make these. These things are awesome. And sure enough, they're selling like crazy. So, and it's same thing with my underspin. Like that was something that like I wasn't planning on making. I made it for the ice fishing season, and that was it. And then I got linked up with probably the best promoter in the muskie world, and he's since convinced me to make a muskie size. And you know Rich is my muskie mentor. He's awesome. And but his name is Rich Reinhardt. And he dude, if you watch some of his videos, he's the most knowledgeable muskie guy that honestly I feel like ever lived. His mentor was Tony Rizzo. And if you've ever heard of the name Tony Rizzo, so back in the day, Tony Rizzo actually was giving Rich all of his overflow work, because Tony Rizzo was one of the first musky lure inventors and guides. So he came out with the Rizzo Wizzo back in the day. And he's written probably, I can't remember how many books he's written, but just an unbelievable amount. And so, becoming that popular in the muskie world in Wisconsin, you're going to have an unbelievable amount of work. And so he would just give Rich all his overflow work and was his mentor for years. And so now, and without Rich, like the Muskie Innovations Bulldog would have never been a thing without Rich.
Wow.
So it's, and he's my mentor and he's my promoter, helping me promote my base in Wisconsin. And it's like without those people in your life, sometimes you would never, me personally, I wouldn't, people wouldn't know me for other things. They would only know me for hair jigs, which are great musky baits too. But it's like at Spinney was kind of like ground zero for testing musky and pike baits for me. There's so many quality fish in there. Yes, there's not a ton of muskies in there, but there are muskies in there. And so I know last summer on this bait when we were testing it, this is my musky chatterbait. This is brand new for this year. So for some of you that are looking that like an upsized chatterbait, this guy's the deal. I also have hair versions too. We had probably a 10-pound trout try to eat that thing, and then we also had quite a few follows for muskies all the way to the boat. We got them in the figure eight, but they just wouldn't eat. And then I actually had a pike jump out of the water on top of this thing. Um, it's it's bananas. The amount of don't want to throw it on just a regular medium heavy. You do need at least a musky rod.
Okay.
Like at least a small musky rod. And I think that's when it comes to big fish like you're fishing for at spinny, like that's one thing I wish and I hope to see more people doing is upsizing their gear. You can catch them on smaller stuff, but you can catch a bluegill on a little stick, but should you? Like you
Right.
probably shouldn't. You should probably use a rod and reel or some sort. That'd probably be better, right? So, like when it comes to these big fish there that we need to protect, upsize your gear, get them in quick, release them faster. It's that
Yeah.
type of thing. And the big baits there, in my opinion, they just kind of set it out from the crowd, and that's you kind of have to think outside the box because that lake is so pressured, and yes, pike are dumb, like they realistically are really dumb. It's just you just have to think outside the box for the ones that used to be dumb. They're old now, so they're a little smarter.
Yeah.
you
So
know
so you said a musky rod. What does that setup look like for guys listening here?
so mind you, all of this stuff you can, if some of your guys are interested in looking at this stuff, you can look at it at the tackle shack. I just got a big ass order in today. So I personally suggest at a minimum an 8 foot. I like a Chaos tackle rod. So Chaos tackle, they're the biggest competitor to St. Croix rods right now. Very, very well built rod, but they're telescopic, so they're nice to fit everywhere, right? Uh, but I like at a minimum, as far as length is concerned, an 8.6. I personally like a 9 foot for trophy pike, but I'm gonna probably go for between 8.6 and 8.6 and 9. I would say going with their tactical strike, which is like a excuse me, or a SWAT, which is so the SWAT is rated for 3 to 10 ounce baits. For the life of me, I can't remember what the SWAT's rated for that. I don't remember what the tactical strike is rated for. I just got that in
Okay.
today, but it's a fantastic rod for that type of setup. You need something that's a little beefier because for the style that I like to fish these baits and the techniques that I like to fish, how I like to fish them, you need something that can rip through those weeds. So
Yeah.
the what I mean by that is for a spinny 11-mile Taylor Park for just sake of argument, right? Um, Pretty much any pike and musky lake. Basically, I'm gonna let that chatterbait sink a little bit. Spinner baits too. I throw a lot of spinner baits, a lot of underspins, a lot of chatterbaits there, glide baits even really. But I don't do the technique with gliders. But I'm gonna let that bait, get down there, at least a few feet at a minimum, probably 4 or 5 feet at least. And then I'm gonna slowly start that retrieve, until you feel that ticking of the blade, whether it be a spinnerbait or chatterbait, stop for a second, and then I'm ripping as hard as I possibly can. And what happens with whether I haven't shown this one yet, but this is that underspin, right? This thing is just absolutely deadly. It has the
Yeah.
same action like the chatterbait does, it's that hinge with that big tail. So what happens when you rip is it hops, right? And that hop is something that's a very bulldog like effect. What I mean, for some of you that aren't aware of the bulldog, very, very well known musky lure that's just a big piece of rubber with a curly tail, and it just hops. And that hop is a very effective triggering mechanism for pike and muskie. Uh, there's so that hop and that slight hang time, and that's normally when you'll get bit. Usually is that. Before I forget, this is a really cool fun fact for any muskie and pike fishermen out there, or somebody that wants to get into it. The reason why pike and muskie follow, and this is a really, really, really cool fact that I learned from my buddy Rich. So his friend, he had a group of buddies that were all muskie fishermen back in the day, and one of them was an optometrist, one of them was a taxidermist. Well, the taxidermist, when they were doing skin mounts back in the 80s, they were obviously the eyeballs were no use. They're putting like marbles and shit in there, right? So they would take the eyes out, and he would give them to his buddy who was an optometrist, and they would study the eyeballs. And so the eyeballs, they figured out in all pike and muskie that they're all nearsighted. They see orange, pink, green the best, and they also see they see like whites and things like that, but it all comes out as a shade of gray. Blacks they see really well, obviously, because that's a good silhouette. So when you're getting follows and stuff, that doesn't mean that you're using the wrong bait. Honestly, it just means you just need to change up your technique a little bit. They're just they can't see anything. They're just trying to get as close as they possibly can to check it out. So sometimes it could just be speed. Getting them to trigger, or getting your bait to go from left to right. That could be as simple as that to get them to actually trigger to eat. But those are a really cool fun fact that I find super interesting to me.
Yeah.
To me, the biology of the fish outweighs any freaking technique that you're going to find, because that's what that fish really is. To me, that's way more important, is finding out the actual study and biology of the fish. To me, that's more important. Especially when you're talking about a bait maker, right? Like, I have so many factors I'm thinking about all the time when I'm making a bait. The triggering mechanisms, what they're going to see, what they're actually after, what's triggering those lateral lines to make them want to eat.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool when you start breaking it down to the finite levels. And when you start talking about like the action of the bait, like I was talking about with the hop of the chatterbait, the bulldog, things like that. That's something that is really, really effective, but it's not the be all end all. They'll eat it on straight retrieve. They'll eat it on just pull. If you just want to just yank all the time and pull it and just make it constantly hop through the water, that's a great tactic too, But
Yeah.
the cool part is about the chatterbait is it rides high in the water. You can use small ones. We used to troll small chatterbaits all the time. They're great baits, but they just get chewed up by everything, not just the big ones.
Yep.
And and it is a great bait. I'm not going to deny it. Little ones will catch big fish. Little spinner baits will catch big fish. The beautiful part about the underspin, especially at places like Spinney, where you have those, if on an off day or when seasons change, when you're talking about seasonal changes,
Yep.
right? Where the big fish, they like stability. So a lot of times they'll hang out and close to deep. They'll be near shallows, but they want deep water access. So when
Yeah.
they're in that deep water, fishing something like an underspin, you can fish that at any depth. You can fish this thing realistically right under the surface if you want, or you can fish that thing 20 feet down where they're not used to seeing blades. That's a big thing. You also have a bladed bait, which is this underspin that makes an unbelievable amount of noise. My buddy Adam and I, we filmed an underwater footage with this thing, and it makes an unbelievable amount of noise. I could not believe it. It's just a simple, and the blade doesn't do the same thing twice in a row. That's the beautiful thing. It either chops,
Cool.
and it's like a flutter spoon, or it spins and then it'll go crazy and then it'll spin and go crazy. I mean, it all depends on the tie. Every bait is different. That's the beautiful thing about making custom baits. Not one bait is the exact same. And
Yeah.
so therefore every single person that's out there, you're throwing a cougar bait, a coug spin. Well, yeah, you are too, but they're both having different actions. So it doesn't really matter. Like every day
Yeah.
that fish sees that bait, it's seeing something different. And a lot of times with those old fish, that's all that takes to get that fish to eat, because guess what? Fish don't have hands. They can't check out that fish or check out that lure with their hands. The only thing they have is their mouth. So that's
Yep.
what a lot of times reaction bites are. Is they're just a lot of times they're startled, aggressive, or they're just checking it out. So many options. It comes to there's so many things to think about that may trigger a fish, but a lot of times they're just curious. They're curious, especially when you're talking about pike and muskie. They can't see very well.
Yeah. So when the grass comes up, the weeds come up, spinning 11 mile, it's everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what weight are what weights for these jig heads are you changing them? Are you changing the speed? Like you're saying, you could throw the same one in deep water or shallow water. Is that just a technique, like a retrieve difference?
Yeah.
Or what weights are you typically throwing out there?
With the underspin, once the weeds start to really come up, I probably most of the time I put the underspin down. Um, Once the weeds start really getting thick,
Yeah.
that's when the chatterbait and spinnerbaits come into play.
Yeah.
Um, that chatterbait is an ounce and a half, and and without effort, it rides, I don't know, 2 inches under the water if you want it to. That massive blade has so much lift, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Um, but those fish, sometimes you got to get down in their face too. So that's when a spinnerbait really comes into play as well. As we all know, those are great baits to get through the weeds, not at least halfway decent. That's when I'll throw the spinnerbaits a lot. The chatterbaits, if they're for some reason they're way too thick and I can't get through them, then I'm gonna throw the chatterbait over the weeds. But if they're still hugging in them, I'm either throwing that spinnerbait and ripping it through the weeds, or throwing that chatterbait right through the weeds. Usually, I have a buddy on the boat with me, so we can kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys are a kayaking tour, so that's a little different. You're not even you don't really have a passenger in your kayak that's out there
Right.
fishing with you, so that's not really an option for you guys. But don't the other thing too is don't overlook inline spinners. That's something that muskie guys have known for years, and a lot of pike guys. Some guys know about them, and some guys, most guys at least know about them, but they're not throwing them.
Yep.
And this is actually tuned. Like, if you're wondering why it's all bent, that's how you make your blade baits work that much better. Um, you
Yeah,
give them
dude.
a little tune, but that's something that if you really want to get the biggest fish in the area, throw a musky sized inline spinner out there right over the weeds. Oh my gosh, it puts off such hardcore vibration, those fish can't stand it. Yeah. But like at spinny, like I personally don't, there's so many different types of weeds there, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what really sets spinny apart is there's only so much topographical, like you know um
The
structure that
contour
you really
changes and yeah.
yeah, that you really got to focus on. It's not like you're fishing a Canadian Shield Lake, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so um with that lake, a lot of times I would say at least 60% of your time is spent deciphering what weeds is holding the most life, and what I mean by that is not the life of the pike, it's the whole ecosystem, right? Because when
Yeah.
you have to think about that type of stuff, you're not just after the big fish. As much as we all want to go out there and just catch the big fish, the best fishermen in the world are multi-species fishermen. Why? Because they understand what's going on
Yeah.
um, in the ecosystem. So if you're the type of guy that likes to do that, you're going to do really well when you start targeting the predatory fish, because you understand where the bait fish are staged.
Yeah.
And that's so important. That's so important. Uh, but at a place like that, it's really kind of deciphering what weeds for what day are holding the active fish. And that's something, it changes from day to day. Personally, as much as people like to rave about broadleaf at Spinney. Broadleaf and I don't get along. There are. I mean, I have seen some big fish in the broadleaf, but they could care less. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know why. What it is. What I'm doing wrong there, because there's obviously fish there.
Yeah.
There's the food's there. I've seen the jumbos over there, but
Yep.
have I caught them? No, honestly, no, I haven't. All my active fish have been in the thinner leaved type uh, uh, type of cabbage. It's still thick stuff, but it's big, giant, just isolated sections. That's where
Yep.
that's where I find the biggest fish. But that's kind of a broad statement. There's lots of those out there, and I'm not going to give away anybody's honey hole, but it's something that you kind of have to just go out there and figure out for yourself. But personally, I focus in like 12 to 7 feet of water.
Yeah.
That's a very, very broad statement, right? But but what I mean by that is you focus in 7 feet of water, but in 12 feet of water. So
Yep.
like that's the fish aren't always on the bottom.
Exactly. Yep.
Fish feet up. You know, the fish don't have the pike. I don't know if you know. I assume you probably know this. Obviously, pike don't have eyes on the bottom of their head, right? So they're always looking up. So
Yep.
therefore, that they're more than happy. It takes a couple kicks of the tail, and they're up there eating that bait.
Yep.
So that's a big fish. It doesn't take very long to get up there. And it's man, dude, it's I don't know. There's something about those pike. They're just different, man. That's why I saw what fishing for those fish at that lake is what inspired me to go bigger, right? Because
Yeah.
I just kept going bigger and bigger, bigger with my baits, and it didn't seem to matter. I only kept on getting more and more quality fish, and so with my rods, even
Yeah.
right, like there's a spot in particular that I fish every time I'm at Spinney, and I almost get my rod taken out of my hand every single time. It's one specific. It's one specific inside of a turn if you look at the topography of that area, it's just a good spot for a big one every time.
Yeah.
And there's more than just that one there, but there is for some reason there's a big one there every single time I'm there. I'm assuming she lives there full time,
Yeah.
and so my muskie rod that I use, it actually has a pistol grip on the handle. It's called a jig ripper. It's the most handy freaking tool that I thought was so stupid and gimmicky until you use it. You
Really?
get you get an extra third out of your day as far as your time is, your actual
Yeah.
usable time on the water, because it's so much more ergonomic on your arm and ripping. And basically once I
Yeah.
got that, I was like, oh no, it's game time. I'm going back to that spot, and I'm not getting
Yeah.
that rod ripped out of my hand. It's not happening. I'm going to be ready. Sure enough, that fish just ate a little differently. It did a little differently this time, and it slacklined me. Had her pinned for a little bit, and that fish had the gall to follow all the way to the boat. And after I lost it, it still followed the bait all the way to the boat.
Yeah.
Her head just looked like a shovel, just following all the way to the boat. And I was just like, you son of a gun. Like
Yeah.
how like you slacklined me. So and that was when I was testing the chowder bait. Uh,
Gosh.
that's something that I think that if more people would give it a shot at that lake and kind of put their bass stuff aside and realize that these fish are just in a different league. They're not, you're fishing for pike, but you're also talking about a pike fishery that's top 10 in the world. We
Yeah.
have we have we have Canadian class pike fishing here in Colorado, and there's so many places, not so many. There's a good amount of places in the state where you legitimately have a chance on an upper 40-inch class fish, every single time you go.
Yeah.
And we're so blessed to have that. But this, the big thing is having the right gear to do so. And what I mean by that isn't just about your rod and reel, which is very important, not just for throwing big baits, but it's also very important to be able to get to not stress these fish out, because muskie and pike. Pike are a little bit more resilient, but not by much. But they're definitely a little bit more resilient. But muskies, they suffer really really bad from delayed mortality. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before or not.
Yeah, so yeah, let's talk about you let them go and it's huge in the bass catch not catch and release the weigh-ins. It's huge in that right now. But yeah, speak on it for pike and muskie.
Yeah, so delayed mortality, it affects fish in a couple different ways. But from my understanding, what's the most common thing that happens is that they just go to the bottom of the lake, stop eating, and die because
Yep.
they get so stressed out from that fight, whether it be in the fight, in the net, overhandling, mishandling. They get so stressed, they just end up, stop eating and they go straight to. We actually saw two muskies yesterday at the bottom of the lake, because the water's so clear. Not at Spinney, different lake, and we saw them just down there dead on their bellies up, but they don't float. It's very rare that you see a pike and muskie float from delayed mortality because they. I don't understand exactly. I wish I knew everything about the biology of a dead muskie or pike, but I don't. I
Yeah.
do know that's one of the hardest reasons why it's so hard to track. Is because they sink to the bottom. They go to the bottom and they die and just become fish food. It really sucks. And same thing happens with lake trout, but they're again a little bit more resilient. But as they get older, the less resilient they get,
Yep.
and that's a very and that's a big deal too. That's why I failed to mention it earlier. I run the Twin Lakes Ice Derby in the winter, and that's why I completely switched the weigh system around. Was because of that.
Yep.
That was a big issue. We were in the springtime. We were having issues with mid 40-inch fish floating to the top come spring. They weren't sinking to the bottom. They were dead under the ice.
Yeah.
But there are some that were going to the bottom and just dying. So that was a big issue. But there's but with pike and muskie, it's a very very common thing, especially in a state where you cannot buy you almost anywhere. As far as I know, I'm the only store that has muskie size nets. There's got to be more, but I have yet to find one. Like
Yeah.
it was like pulling teeth when I was in big box store to try to get them to put big enough nets in their store. So maybe they've changed their ways. Other stores have changed their ways, but as far as I know, they still haven't. And it's something that is really really detrimental to fisheries. Honestly, I mean, people need big enough nets. A net that you can use as a live well. That's so important. You need a net that
Yeah.
has a flat bottom to keep the fish horizontal in the water. And, after you net them, it needs to be a live well for that fish. Whether you're fishing for trout, pike, muskie, treat them all the same. Have
Yeah.
them keep, as Pete and Mano likes to say, keep fish wet. It only
Yeah.
makes sense. The fish lives
Yeah.
its whole life in the water. Keep it in the freaking water. Stop dragging these things on the shore and get them all covered in dirt.
Uh,
You know,
yep.
I see it all the time, and it's something that especially online, and it's because it's not. It's almost like you kind of up in the mountains. We don't you don't see a bunch of litter everywhere. Why? Because people respect the resource. There's trash cans in a lot more places than not. Why? Because we want to keep it nice, and so
Yeah.
therefore, and so if people were given or had the opportunity to buy these things, whether it be release tools like long pliers, long hook grippers, jaw spreaders, like big nets, release gloves, all the things you need to chase big fish safely. Um, is if they had these things available, it's like talking about Wisconsin in 1960. Like that's what Colorado realistically, when you start looking at like
Yeah.
what we have available, that's what it's like. And so when you start talking about like your ability to get these things or the inability of, it's no surprise that we have this crazy delayed mortality factor of these fish, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you just see it all over the place, like, and and Spinney's really bad for the fact that people just believe that all pike are bad, and so they're just throwing them all
Yeah.
So they just throw them up on the shore,
Yeah.
and it's like what I showed you earlier, pike lives matter, right? They do.
Yeah,
They
man.
do. And so like it's bananas, and I really think that, we have the opportunity. We're at that kind of that cusp of we have this awesome fishery, and we need to make steps to protect it. And it's not just about, like, oh yeah, you need to, these baits are going to catch them, and like that's going to help you, protect them. Not really. You're putting hooks in their face at that point. But really, what we need to be able to do is help protect these fish is really education, not
Yeah.
just to the people themselves, but the hell, the tackle shops. I don't know what it's like buying stuff in Denver. I don't live in Denver. I don't ever wish to live in Denver, or yeah, it's not where I want to be. You
Yeah.
know, but it's but it's one of those things that those places. They're it's not that they don't know. I think that's the big thing. It's not that they don't know, it's they're not willing to spend the money. They don't think it's worth the risk versus the reward, right? So, like, for example, some things that I sell in my store, I make absolute garbage money on. Why? Because you need them to safely, chase
Right.
these fish. And to me, it's not about the money. It's about, like, you need these things to go out there, and I hear it all the time when people say, "Oh, well, you can catch a 20-pound fish on 10-pound line." It's like, yes, you can, but the thing is how stressed was that fish when you let it go? What was its
Yeah.
chances of, what was the
Bright
probability of
red.
living?
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
know, and so that's when it comes to your release tools, you need when muskie and pike fishing is not, I mean, fishing in general, if you really want to get hardcore about it and chasing trophy fish and targeting trophy fish, is no way, shape, or form cheap. It's flat out, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
And it's a passion. If you want to get into that trophy realm of chasing those big fish, you're going to have to spend some money. But guess what? That stuff is going to last you. I don't lose baits. Like,
Yeah.
people get kind of blown away by that, but I don't lose baits. I haven't lost a bait, I don't know, 5 years maybe. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, like, I mean, the only time I lose baits is through the ice because I get broke off by a muskie or pike jigging for trout. That's
Yeah.
it. Like, honestly, like, that's about it. And I mean, because I'm using heavy gear, like, I mean, my leaders, like, I use, like, I'm honest to God, I bought a giant spool of saltwater line a long time ago, so I tie my own.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I got one right here. So, but I'll show you. But basically, for the most part, I use, this is actually only 50-pound. This is what I'd use for pike. Most times for most pike, I'd probably use 50-pound, but it's not uncommon for me to use 100. To be honest, and believe it or not, I've caught plenty of trout on 100-pound leaders, tons of them.
Yeah.
But I really love these awesome little saltwater clips. They're basically a paper clip, and it's the
Oh, yeah.
easiest. Originally meant for tarpon. They're the strongest, easiest clip I've ever used in my entire life. I feel like they're as strong as a freaking split ring. Honestly, like, they're that strong.
Yeah.
They're super cheap. Usually, you can get a pack of 10 for about $2, and they're the nicest freaking clips I've ever used. But when it comes to leaders, like, a lot of people have this debate about steel, fluoro, mono. You know, there's a really cool science to this. The realistically is, I know we're running quite a bit of time here, but I'm more than
No,
happy.
we're
I could
good.
talk. I could talk forever. The big thing is, like, when you're talking about the science of leaders, right? Like, and it really is a science to it, and it's more not necessarily a science. It's about the sound. So if you're jig fishing for muskies in the early season, muskie and pike. What I mean by jig fishing, do I have one of my dirty dancers around here? I might. And that's the other thing. I have weird names for all my baits, right? So, like, um, I
Got to.
uh, so it looks all funny right now. Maybe I'll comb it out to show you. That's the other thing. comb your baits. Comb your baits, people. If you're out there throwing hair jigs and you do not have a comb, you're messing up. Like, you're really screwing up. Spend the $1. I even sell them $4. Like, I make no money on them. I don't care. I don't care. Just buy a freaking comb. Your baits will last longer. The fish will eat them better. Like, you will love them. But when you're jig fishing for muskies and what's it called, pike in the early season, it's something, I like. Most of the time I throw either mono or fluorocarbon. But if you happen to see a fish that's just kind of sunning itself, a lot of times they're not actually sunning. There's a theory they're actually sleeping. So, which is crazy to think, you're just like, well, you would think, like maybe a pike or a muskie probably sleeps at nighttime, but most of the time that's not true. Most of them are actually nocturnal. They will be eating during the daytime too. They sleep at a variety of times, but a lot of their big feeding times are at nighttime, when other fish are less able to see, or is less, less likely to notice them.
Right.
So they're ambush predators. So a lot of the bigger ones will eat mostly at nighttime, but that's all another reason why they like going deep water, right? Why? Because they're light sensitive, temperature sensitive. Big pike are very, very, very temperature sensitive. So, there's a theory that a hair jig works so well in the spring because when you bounce something right in front of its face, right, and this wire leader goes like this, it's making a snapping noise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that snapping noise is actually wakes them up like that, and they don't wake up like us, you and I, where we have to wake up and drink coffee, wipe the sleep out of our eyes. They wake up in a hurry, all pissed off, and they just suck one of those things up.
That's cool.
It's a really cool thing to see. And it's, again, just a theory. Who knows? I don't speak pike. I can't tell them, hey man, is this how you woke up? That doesn't work like that. So, when it comes to, wire and piano wire, I don't know if you've ever used piano wire before. It's straight wire. So what I mean by that is, I think I actually have one to show you. Yep, here we go. This is actually another awesome muskie company out of Illinois. His name is Babe Campbell. He makes it by a company called Big Guy Baits, for crankbaits and crankbaits and like suics, jerk baits. Yes, it is more visible. It's more hardware, that's more visible in our clear water. So that's why I don't use them as often unless the water gets dirtier. But this will give your crankbaits, your jerk baits, your dive and rise baits so much more action. It's not even funny because it's more deliberate, right?
Okay.
And so there's no give to a piano wire leader.
Gotcha.
The other thing, but the biggest issue is they don't last that long. A couple fish, like you're talking maybe 10 fish. Once they get kinked, that's the big thing. If they don't get kinked, you have a lot of life on them. But once you get kinks and creases, it creates a weak point. They break. So, but one thing that a lot of people are switching to is 49 strand wire. And 49 strand wire is awesome. It doesn't kink. It has no recoil to it. And it's fucking cable is what it is. It's just cable. Super durable. I carry that in my shop. We have them specifically made for my hair jigs and underspins by a guy named Gene from Leaders and Lures. If any of you guys are looking for leaders or lures by Gene, he's out of Illinois. He's an old man. He's awesome. The nicest old man in the world. He'll make whatever custom leaders you want.
Nice.
He's the nicest old man ever. He's awesome. But he, again, will make any custom leaders you want, and he'll get them shipped out that day. Honestly, they're freaking amazing. He does a great job. Everything is crimped, not tied or anything. Everything's all crimped. But it's but the real big debate when it comes to here in Colorado, people are so worried about the visual factor of it, because of our clear
Yeah.
water. And I
So
get
clear.
that.
Yeah.
I get that. I get that 100%. Where in most of the big like the Esox world. So when we talk about Esox world, we're talking muskie pike. In the Esox world, what most people are talking about as far as your leader selection goes is the sound it makes going through the water when trolling. So wire makes a hit like a almost like a hissing sound at a certain speed going through the water when you're trolling crankbaits and such, like big headlocks and matlocks and jakes and grandmas
Yeah.
and things like that. And so, like when you're trolling for muskie, most of the time you're at like 3 to 5 miles an hour, so you're cooking,
Moving.
and
Yeah.
and that wire is just hissing through the water, and that's what a lot of people have predicted over the last few, or have come up with the last few years, last maybe 10 to be honest, talking about that wire was the catching that was really catching these fish was the hissing sound through the water that was setting their baits apart versus the rest of everybody else's. And you're not going to get that same effect casting. And I and
Sure.
I don't think I've trolled for pike before, but never at that speed. And so, like at a place like Spinney, you're obviously that's irrelevant. You're not going to be doing it like that. It's at Spinney is the one really cool thing that I wish I don't know what people I don't know everybody, and I don't exactly talk to everybody when I'm out there on the water either. Even though you're out there with all of half of Denver, you don't exactly I don't exactly say hi to every person I see out there. I'm friendly at the boat ramp and I'll talk to people and I'll hand out random baits and stuff. But for the most part, I'm on the water fishing, so I don't really talk to that many people,
Yeah.
when I'm out there. And I think what a lot of people should start trying, you know, is more gliders. That's something that
Yeah.
is so much fun. That's
Yeah.
so much fun. I mean, that's a bait that like you're in control of the action. You're
Yeah.
controlling if that bait is going to go left or right, jolting fast or hang, or you're going to
Yeah.
trigger. You're personally making that fish trigger, and it's something that some of the biggest fish every year in my boat or my buddies' boats get caught on gliders, and it's something that I don't give enough opportunity to be, if I'm being completely frank about it. I don't throw it enough. The one aspect that so baits are just tools. And when you hear me talk
Yeah.
about tools or whatever, like those are baits. Like baits are just tools to me, and tools for a certain application. And when you're talking about like spinning, like sometimes you'll get those big weed patches, or patches, and then you'll have this giant hole.
Yep. Exactly.
Throw a glider.
So,
Throw throw a
yeah.
glider in there, and let it just, but like give it little taps, and then let it hang. And it's
Have
something
us.
that you will see the biggest muskie, or not muskies, potentially. Now we got muskies in there, but
Yeah.
biggest pike, they'll just come up and annihilate that thing. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking small gliders. I throw small to medium sized muskie bait gliders. So we're talking, 9 to 10 inch phantoms. You
Yep.
know, um, if anybody's interested in phantom lures, definitely check them out. They're freaking awesome. They're super durable and they have weight systems in them, so you can fish them at any depth. They're
Yep.
just fantastic. You can bounce them off rocks if you want. They'll still fish. It's something that you have to really really kind of experiment out there. I personally haven't gotten into the topwater bite out there. I know it happens.
Yeah.
I've witnessed them eat a loon. Like I've witnessed that, and it's crazy. It's bananas when it happens. I've gotten on topwater pike. I've gotten them on buzz baits and stuff, but never at spinny. It does.
Yeah.
I know they eat topwaters there. There's no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind. I just haven't given them enough chance, to be honest, and that's because I was, when I'm out there, I'm testing my baits a lot, and so it is hard for me to switch to baits that aren't. I do throw baits that aren't mine, but it is hard for me to do that because I am testing baits constantly. Like there's
Yeah.
so many baits in my boat that have never seen the light of day. As far as like in other people's hands. I
Sure.
have I have a lot of baits that I can't even talk about right now that that are will be coming out in the next few years. That's how far out we test. I'm working on baits. We try to do. I say we, me. Well, I'm trying to release. 2 years
dude.
from now. As long as everything goes right. Um, there's a lot of really, really cool things that I play around with all the time, little tweaks that I think are really going to make a difference in the muskie and pike fishing world, and like this, I'll show you a bait right now. So this is an underspin that if you're fishing the Spinny Mountain tournament and you're trying to chase trophy pike, you need one of these chatterbaits or this pattern of chatterbait or underspin in your arsenal. I mean, it's this perch, man.
Yeah, dude.
This perch is just absolutely freaking deadly. There is a small population of perch in that lake, and you want to know what the fattest pike are eating? They're eating perch,
Yeah,
and
dude.
that's it's no question. I know at 11 Mile last winter, we really made a means to throw my perch hair jigs, and all the trout and pike, they came in and did not hesitate. When they would kind of, hesitate on some of my other jigs, like the sucker pattern, that's good, in the deeper water. But when you're fishing shallow, you want to throw perch or rainbow trout or hell, a black hair jig is hard to beat.
Yeah,
It's one of those things where they wouldn't even question it. They would just go, they would just swim. You'd see them swim right in and just engulf it. They don't even question it. We wonder why there's only a small population of perch in that lake, right? It's
yeah,
because they're eating them. That's why.
yeah,
Perch reproduce.
yep,
They're fine by themselves. It's in that lake. There's so many techniques you could try. It's a very dynamic fishery in that aspect. There's so many different versions of the weeds to try to figure out different times of year for different weeds you want to target. You know, but I am pretty simple when I'm talking about my go-to baits. My color patterns and stuff. I am very simple. Like when you start talking about patterns and stuff, but don't let patterns get hang up on you too much. Sometimes, like your go-tos really are just, or really the pattern of the day is not necessarily. Oh, sorry, the bait of the day. Usually, it's just how you're working that bait through the water.
yeah,
Um, is when you fish spinny, are you are you? So I know you said you throw chatterbaits. I know at least it's what we were talking about before. You
yeah.
throw chatterbaits around. Do you throw hair jigs? Is that something that you try out there?
Yeah, I've tried hair jigs. I'm newer on the hair jigs for
Trout.
pike and trout. But another thing that works real well are jerk baits. Um, they'll hit that pause
Yep.
sometimes and just smoke it. Um, but I
You
know
know,
hair jigs crush them out there. I know several guys that just crush them on hair jigs.
it's something that I feel like a lot of ways people aren't talking about the hair jig thing, and it's it's an art. It really is. I mean, not just making the damn things, but fishing them. It is an art, and everybody. And the beautiful part about it, it's so versatile. There's so many different types of ways you can fish them. You could literally just hold a hair jig off the side of the boat, and you will get bit.
Yeah,
It will happen. And it's like at spinning, you are kind of limited because you can't use live bait even if you wanted to.
yep,
You can't use leeches or nothing. So there is limitations there. You can't use salted baits. But there's there, man, dude, like it. I'm honestly excited to see what the winning fish is going to be this year. Being a sponsor, it is really cool to see. I get a little inside. People tell me a little bit more information than they should sometimes about what they caught them on there, but I can't. Honestly, it just kind of helps me design baits for the next year for them.
yeah,
And that's I've been a sponsor for you guys for this will be going on the second year. And uh, I didn't hear much, a ton of feedback last year from the Spinning Mountain tournament, but it's not like I expected a ton. I just enjoy putting baits in the hands of people that are actually going to use them and not just shove them in the back of their tackle box and never use them. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
and it's putting baits in the hands of people that are true anglers, guys that are out there grinding it out. Competitive fishing to me is so much fun. It's not even like I miss it so much more than probably anything.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, like I told you earlier, I fished on the BASS and FLW for all of my teenage years, and so every year I fished that Taylor Park Pike Derby, and
Yeah.
this year I, I I did horrible. It was a horrible. It was a horrible, horrible time out there. I got one fish the whole tournament.
Oh,
Little tiny guy. It was miserable. We launched. We looked at. We got to the top of Monarch, or not Monarch, Cottonwood Pass that day.
yeah.
This much ice on the road, and
Oh,
at the top, 7 foot snow drifts everywhere, and on the sides, so clear, but sides so giant. We get down into the gully. I knew it was supposed to rain sometime that day, but it wasn't predicted to rain. Like it was supposed to rain, but it was also supposed to start warming. Right? It started raining at about I don't know 6:15 or sorry 7:15. The tournament started at 7, and it didn't stop raining until about 1. And so it was absolutely brutal. It didn't
dude.
break it didn't break 38 degrees until 1. Like it was absolutely brutal out there. And needless to say, it's been so cold, the water's been so high, the weed growth back in Taylor, the weeds just weren't there yet. So the fish were
Yeah.
still deep, and targeting big fish in deep water in a place like Taylor is very difficult.
Yeah.
And and as Spinney, is a much, like it's not a lake trout lake. So it does, so those lakes over in South Park, they heat up a lot quicker and the
Yeah.
weed growth doesn't die off like it does at Taylor. And so it's, like I know, uh, like early season out there, uh, for early and late season, like kind of like what I touched on earlier is glide baits, but I'm really really interested to see what people really end up crushing them on this year, but or if the bite's any good or not. I mean, for it's been good to us, I would for the people that do actually listen, I don't know how many viewers you have, but for the people that do listen, you know, um, don't be afraid to throw big baits. It's something that it is daunting at first until you get your first bite.
Yeah.
That's all there else is to it. Once you get confidence in it, you need to, whether it be my baits or another bait, it doesn't really matter to me. Just throw something big.
Yeah.
Those fish, they can see that they don't see very well. They need something big, something that's going to move a lot of water. That's probably the biggest thing for me. In a lot of cases, is the amount of water you're going to move in a day, or in a cast. You have to be able to make your presence known, and that's something that comes with time. And there was a lot of trial and error that went into that. And you don't always have to throw big baits. Let the fish kind of tell you. You don't. I don't speak pike, so needless to say, I kind of let the fish tell me what they want, for the day. But that's for me a lot easier than a lot of other people, because again, I have somebody else in the boat with me. We can kind of tag team that and figure out a pattern pretty quickly. You know, my rule of thumb at Spinney and other lakes that kind of fish like Spinney is I start in the deeper water, because like most times those fish, like I was talking about earlier, they're more temperature sensitive. I normally start in the deeper water in the beginning of the day, and if it's going to be cold, if the water's still cold, and then as the day warms up at about 9 to 10, I then will head shallow, and then I'll go back deep as midday. As midday progresses,
Yeah.
those fish will go up in the shallows, they'll feed, and then they go back down to the deeper areas to digest their food.
Yeah.
But again, they don't want to travel very far. And that's the big thing, is you got to find shallow flats with good weeds next with deep water access. And for the people, I assume, that are fishing that tournament, have a topographical map and can probably figure that out pretty freaking quickly.
Oh yeah.
It just find good livable weeds that aren't stupid thick, but still very, that medium thickness, if that's a thing, in that lake near deep water, and kind of pound it out because there are big fish around you at all times at that lake. You know, just give it some time,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to be surprised if I see big pike or big trout being caught on these underspins this year. Honestly, like I said, we had about a 10-pounder try to smoke this thing last summer, but in black. The black is honestly, this is the UFO. It's that mirage with green,
Yeah.
but at spinny, it's hard to beat black. I mean, it realistically is. It's hard to beat black and hair jigs and spinner baits and chatterbaits. That's my one little tip I'll give people out there that may not know, or just think about if you have a black bait, throw it because there's a good there's a good chance that pike will eat it. There's other patterns that work too that I like a lot, but I would if I was a betting man in my tackle box, like I might have just a mass slew of black baits when I go to spinny because of all sorts of shapes and sizes, weights, different varieties of them. Black is definitely a go-to of mine. It's something that I think that if more people would, stop thinking we got to match the hatch. Well, for pike, it's a lot of we got to make sure that fish can actually see what the hell we're throwing. So let's throw something. There's so much bait in places like that. You need to stand out, and it's a beautiful fishery. I just hope that people can we were talking fish conservation before. People can kind of look through the propaganda themselves and look at what's being told to us and kind of and be able to see for themselves on what they choose to do with keeping and selective harvest and things like that, because that's a big issue. Selective harvest, like is necessary. As much as I don't keep fish anymore, I just don't. I don't really keep fish anymore, because I just don't. I don't know. I mean, I just don't really eat fish anymore. But it's I love catching them, but I don't really eat them. And the thing is, though, is that there's just a selective harvest is necessary, but doing so like with knowledge, right? Like you need to know what the hell you're doing, and whether it be trout, suckerfish, or or Lakers or pike or muskie, like there is such a thing as a selective harvest. Even back home in Ohio, where I'm originally from, crappies they overpopulate places like crazy.
They can be terrible. Yeah.
Oh, but they're tasty. They're tasty. They're fun to catch, and selective harvest is a big thing. You just don't want to take the biggest fish in the system. You take the medium-sized ones, right? So like a pike, you don't want a little tiny guy because you ain't getting anything off of that, right? But and honestly, you don't want to take those anyways because more than likely that's a male. So that's the other thing we haven't even talked about, right? Is is selective harvest, and that's something like I don't exactly know the proper size to take, but I would assume it's somewhere around 20 to 22 inches.
That's our general rule is like if we go pre-fishing, because that's another thing. Like during our tournaments, any of the tournaments we have, you're not allowed to keep any fish there. It's an agreement that we have with every body of water we go on. But if we're pre-fishing and have a fish fry or something, basically 20 to 22 is kind of our rule. It kills me to see people throwing 30-inch pike on the shore just to kill them because they think that they're treated like an invasive species out there. And like you said, we've got people coming from all over the world, or that would die to come from anywhere to catch these trophy fish that are out here.
And it's so you touched on something there that I find really funny, right? And the invasive species thing, right? Like they're not invasive. You know what's invasive? 90% of all fish in the high Rockies. Like what do you like in Colorado? Like there's only a very finite like 3 or 4 species of fish total that are actually native. Like pike were introduced into our system back in the 60s by the CPW.
Yeah.
Like that's something that and honestly
and we're stocking these trout out of airplanes. you know?
Oh yeah, and the other thing, the funny part about it too, right, is like, so pike, or not just pike, fish stock lakes by themselves. I know it's a crazy concept for the CPW, but fish stock lakes by themselves. They
Yeah.
don't realistically need help most of the time, right? As long as you're selective harvest, you're doing your proper job, due diligence on that.
Yeah.
Fishing, having, honestly, I wouldn't be against having seasons for fish if we would actually have the right, stockings of fish in the state. What would happen if we stock the fish that reproduce? Our licenses would go down, in cost, because we're not spending tens of millions of dollars a year on stocking in a state for fish that literally don't reproduce. Like the think about how many, like, put it this way, rainbow trout in our state, how little they actually make it to, they do go through the motions, they try to spawn and everything. The very, very, very small amount actually make it to adulthood is bananas. You're talking like
Yeah.
less than 1%. Like it's crazy. And cuppos, those are hybrids, so they're not doing anything anyways, right?
Yep.
And when you start hearing people talk, and even the CPW talking about tiger muskie. Well, what happens when we don't want to stock them anymore? It's like, well, aren't you supposed to know what you're doing? Right? Like, why do you have a plan B?
Yeah.
Like, that's like, if you really knew what you were doing, why do you have a plan? Why do you even have a plan B? Right? So when you start talking, about stocking and things like that in the state, it's pretty crazy, because yes, the tiger muskies are doing a great job on trying to take out the undesirable species, right? But it's really stinks, because some of these fisheries, the CPW doesn't care about they just flat out don't care about the fact that we could have trophy muskie fisheries in the state, and the amount of money that brings to the area.
Oh yeah.
They don't care to think about that type of thing, right? The pike and muskie fisheries, once you start feeding pike and muskie trout, it's bananas. Like, you're talking Green Bay sized muskies,
Yeah.
and they get so fat, they carry the weight perfectly throughout the fish. You would have, I mean, you're talking literally like trophy class fisheries, and the amount of money that brings to the areas. Muskie fishermen and pike fishermen, especially trophy fishermen, are not scared to spend money. They'll go spend ridiculous amounts of money on gear,
Oh
on
yeah.
lodging, and I mean, it's a whole economy around it. You know, dude, like, I was at the small Muskie Expo in Wausau in March this year, and they
Yeah.
were calling us the foreigners, right? Because we're from Colorado. The people are just like, "What? That's a
Yeah.
thing?" You know? And so they were people just, put it this way, they were lining outside my booth to buy my baits, right?
It's
We
awesome.
sold probably 150 of my underspins and 75 hair jigs, right? In
Jeez.
3 days. And there was people grabbing handfuls of baits, rods, nets from all over I mean, you're talking,
Oh yeah.
people would walk, and this was the small expo. Muskie fishermen are not scared to spend money, and that's the
Yep.
thing, when you're talking about stocking in a place, if you really want to bring, and keep something, going for a long time, stock fish that reproduce. I feel like the brown trout are doing it just fine. I promise.
Yeah.
And it's a we have such an awesome fisheries here that it really could be just it could be even better. But that being said, we are truly blessed for where we're at, and the fisheries that we do have. And we can stop. I can stop talking bitching about what we don't have here, and start actually talking about what we do have. And that's the truth of it. The one thing that I would touch on is, which I don't think any of your guys in your club do this, but one thing I have noticed is pike being bow fished. Have you heard about a lot of this? So, like,
Oh,
there's a lot of big trophy pike. Not maybe not in spinning, but like at Stagecoach and Taylor Park and Elkhead Reservoir, there's a lot of bow fishing going on. And so, like, these guys, they're just going through. And what are the easiest pike to shoot? Big ones.
Big ones, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they're going
Oh,
through and just shooting them like they're carp, you know? And, yeah, carp are fun to catch too, but that's basically just a giant sucker fish.
yeah,
Like, what the carp will live in a swamp. Like,
yeah.
they don't, like
Yeah,
they're
when when they read a sign, at that lake that says, that it's invasive or hey, keep as many as you can, that in a way promotes that in my mind.
exactly.
It's not promoting, hey, we have too many if they're between hell, even like 18 to 24, whatever, keep them, but there's not that at all. And I agree with you 100%. I do want to talk about something here. There's kind of a parallel. You're talking big fish. I keep thinking just big game fish, big game hunting out here. How much money is drawn to that, but also how much time someone puts in for that shot. And a lot of guys in the club, they go elk hunting here or bear hunting. And I'll tell you what, nothing's going to feel worse than going out trying to catch and maybe you just even snag into a fish of a lifetime on one of these places. You kill that fish, that's going to kill your whole vibe on everything that you had just either busted your ass to get that fish, or maybe, hey, you just, lightning strikes twice, or whatever. Maybe you just got lucky and got that fish, but that's like gut shotting an elk,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
you've
Absolutely.
got to, you know, and the guys in the club, they get this, it's more for like other people, but hey, if you're going to go out and try to catch a fish of a lifetime, literally people would, my dad, he's in Illinois, he travels up to Canada to go fish. He would love to come out here for an opportunity at some of the pike that, Jeremy caught, I think a 44 pike at 11 mile.
That's a
You're
giant.
not exactly. And like you're saying, glide bait, like you're talking about. But man, how terrible would it feel to catch that thing? Feel like I'm probably never going to catch that fish again in my life, and you kill it. Um,
Well, and the thing is though is a lot of you know real today's fishermen, to be honest, aren't the problem. A lot of them aren't. Maybe some of the trout guys. To be honest, I'm sorry for any trout guys that might be listening, but some of the trout guys, they just don't understand. So that they may not have as much do the due diligence that a lot of other fish that are trying to protect that resource, are. And that's something that I completely agree. It's just like gut shotting and or shooting an elk. It's very similar. That's a dude. That's a great. I'm going to use that. That's a great that's a great analogy. That's something that's real. That is really true. It's the fact that you have to care for that fish. And understand that you are going out there and that you're interacting with that fish in its own habitat, just as you're trying to shoot that and trying to capture that fish in its own habitat, just like you're trying to shoot that fish in its own habitat. And it's your duty, not just people think it's their right, it's your duty to
yeah,
protect that fish, and and a lot of people say, well, why are you putting a hook in his face then? Well, I'm sorry, that's fishing. Like, I don't know what to tell you besides that. It's just fishing,
yeah,
you know. But it is your duty to release that fish as unharmed as possible. That hook point area will heal. It'll be okay. It's going to be a
yeah,
little traumatized for a little bit, but it'll be okay. And so the thing is like, just trying to release those fish as healthy as possible. Take your time. Don't be in a rush. Don't, with pike and muskie, do not just wish them back and forth. Just hold them. Let them get their bearings and let that fish just get out of your hand. Like
yeah,
it'll kick off. And that is something that is really important. Hold them still, hold them upright, make sure. And the other really important thing is, excuse me, at spinning 11 mile, we all know it gets windy. Use your boat or kayak as a wave breaker. Hold
Yeah.
that fish off on the side of the boat of your boat or kayak that is not getting that the wind is getting, the waves are getting broken by your vessel, and you to allow that fish to get its bearings to swim away. Um, bass are a little different. Obviously, we all know you can wish them back and forth. You're not going to drown them, but that is a real thing with pike and muskie. You can drown them by doing that, which
Hmm.
is crazy that that's a thing. You can drown the fish, but
Yeah.
it is proven you can for pike and muskie, and that's another thing that stresses them out is when you treat them like that. It's not
Yeah.
good. So man, there is that's a very good, that's a really, like I said, I'm going to use that. That's a really good topic to think about,
Yeah.
and like I guess my other question for you, I mean, obviously, you have me on and everything, but my question for you would be, when you how do you break down a body of water? I think that's for me when you start talking about podcasts, and I listen to a lot of muskie podcasts. That's probably one of the, honestly, I probably should have touched on that more than anything. That's something for me that when I talk to somebody, when you start talking about like how with someone that's been very knowledgeable of the area, someone that's a seasoned fisherman, that's a question that I like to hear, and I like to hear other people's take is how do you break down a body of water on a day that you've never been to? Like, let's say your first time you ever went to Spinney, where are you going to start first? Are you starting with maps? Are you starting with, looking online? Or are you starting with just going out there and winging it?
Yeah. So in a kayak, I feel like that's kind of another thing. I agree with you. The multi-species anglers are the best anglers out there because they have to have a strategy, especially if you're fishing a multi-tournament where you have to have a strategy to catch multiple species in that same day. So you have to have a strategy for that. In a kayak, you also don't have the ability to just hop a spot real quick.
That's
So
true.
you're limited there. One of the things that I like to use, I love Google Earth for what it is. Of hey, I can pull down water levels through historical imagery and seeing, um, maybe where are weed beds at, where's some structure that might be under the water, um, channel swings if they're available. But I'm always pairing that with my maps. I use my graphs so much just for mapping to see. I think one of the biggest things you said was, and it's not just pike or trout. Most fish, if you study their behaviors of how they come in, pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, specifically more like bass, walleye, there's going to be a phase where they're going to come in shallow, but they like that access, like you're saying, to deep water, because especially out here in Colorado, the weather's going to change, you know, night and
By the minute.
day to day,
By
right?
the minute. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, like you were saying, having that access to deeper water. So I'll look for things like that. I'll look for creeks that come in. Where do they actually extend out to into that channel? What are they doing? Grass. I think that's a huge thing for up there. But you can also, like you're saying, like I've been in grass areas up there that I just never go back to because it's more of a pain in the ass to fish it than uh, and I've never had much luck there. I'm sure there are guys that crush fish out of there, but there are
And
other grass spots that work better for me.
I think that's where what I was getting at earlier with the big rods and the chatterbaits, right? I'm getting reaction bites out of fish that don't normally see baits. That's that is what I like dumb fish. I want the stupidest fish that I possibly can find. There's fish all over these lakes. You can fish. You can find fish in the shallows. You can fish them suspended out there. You can find them on the bottom in the weeds. There's realistically fish all over the place.
Yeah,
Where are the fish that are the greatest in size, greatest in numbers, and the dumbest in the lake? Well, guess what? They're probably in the deepest, in a relatively deep area of the water, in the thick in the weeds where they're not seeing very many baits. And like you said, there's just a pain in the ass to get there. Whether
yeah,
you're far offshore or you're just, like you just don't have the equipment to get in there and get to them. A lot of it, in my opinion, is just finding the dumbest fish. And I know that, for a lot of people, they're just, when I say that, they're just like, Well, first of all, that's pretty rude to say, right? But like, like, but pretty blunt to
Yeah.
say. But I'm a pretty blunt guy. I mean, I'm going to tell you exactly how it is, and like I'm finding the stupidest fish that I can find, and and usually that's thick in the weeds or off of drop offs, and
Yeah.
because those are areas that in the last few years I've focused on those a lot more. I found my number of sizes of the fish have gone up, like just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I'm not catching the little guys very much anymore. It's mainly big guys because I'm throwing big baits near
Yep.
drop off. That's where they're targeting those really big fish or big bait fish. And so those fish, they just want a quick or a meal to that. They're already where they want to go and digest that food, so they don't have to go very far. So those are going to be the most sluggish, not sluggish, but fat, lazy fish, and those are the ones that I personally like to target down there. You know, and that's where I like the chatterbait. Like I said, is ripping through the weeds. And if you're fishing a drop off and you don't have an underspin, you need one. Like it is realistically the most versatile bait for drop off fishing because you can work that thing down a break line, and
Yeah.
and you're putting a blade in front of a face of a fish that's not used to seeing a bait or a blade. And blades are great for pike and muskie. And like I said, you can hop that thing down, and when you hop, there's a good chance you're going to get bit. And that and again, you're showing a dumb fish, a bait it's never seen before, in a spot it's never seen before. It's just all of that formula, the recipe for a great time.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, fishing a tournament, it is difficult to convince yourself to throw baits that you're not used to throwing. Everybody has their confidence baits. But the thing is with confidence baits is that it's just like in the Midwest, right? Everybody loves tradition, right? But you kind of need to step away from tradition to grow. And so therefore you kind of need to put away at least whether it be in a tournament or not, put your confidence bait down.
Yeah.
I had to do it to myself this year.
Yeah.
Honestly, I did. I had to start throwing more bucktail spinners. I was, for muskie, it was something that I didn't have a lot of confidence in. My second biggest muskie was caught on one of these, and on the first bucktail I ever tied. Honestly, the first one I ever tied was in the water for 5 minutes, caught a 40-incher. Right, like it was bananas, and it's something that personally just didn't have a lot of confidence in.
Yeah.
They're hard to throw because they pull really hard, especially big blades. And I just didn't have a lot of confidence. So I was like, you know what? We are testing baits, but I'll have a buddy of mine with me throw the tester baits, excuse me, and I'll throw the bucktail spinners, and we'll see where it goes, and I haven't had a bunch of success on them, but it's something that I think that a lot of guys need to just do, and that's put away your confidence baits, explore the realm of all the baits that are out there. Because yes, that confidence bait is going to catch fish. There's so many different ways to do it, but the cool thing is the learning part of it. It's not just about you catching a fish every day.
Yeah.
It's learning how to work those fish and getting them to trigger them to bite. It's something that what are you going to do when that fish gets to the boat? Like that's something that I ask a lot of my guys out there. It's like that come out with me on the boat. It's like, what is your plan when that fish comes to the boat? Are you going to get caught with your pants down? Because that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't even thought of it, then probably, and it happens to me. The biggest muskie I've ever had follow in my entire life. I don't know how big it was. I never caught a muskie that big. It was easily over 50 inches. I'm not going to deny it
Jeez.
was easily over 50. And it was and when you see it happen, like you hear about it, you watch videos, but
Yeah.
most of those places videos you watch, the water's not that clear. You're not going to see that fish follow from 30 yards, 30, 40 yards out. And all of a sudden you just see this log following it. Its head's this big around, it looks like, and and all you just don't believe your eyes. I stopped reeling. That's what happened. My brain shut off. It just shut off. I
Hmm.
just stopped reeling. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and when you just have to mentally prepare yourself for that to happen. And and the more practice and practice you get on the water, the more days you get out there with chasing those trophy fish, and you do get a follow to the boat. You got to figure what out. You got to have a at least a somewhat plan, and
Yeah.
to be able to actually seal the deal when the moment comes, because it's not always going to come. The moment
Yeah.
the moment's not always going to be there. You may not get it today, you may not get it tomorrow, maybe the next day, but it will come one of those days. It's whether it be pike, muskie, or lake trout, they all act in very similar ways as far as hunting baits go, and that's something that you have to be able to figure out how to get that fish to react and mess up. Find the dumbest fish for the moment. And for pike in the summertime, you're going to find me fishing deeper areas. They will be shallow sometimes, but yeah, in the fall, that's when I'll go shallow. But like if I like kind of like with the question I asked you earlier, and that was, how do you break down a body of water? And I think for me, it's more of I'll start deep in the morning with weeds, drop offs, things like that, and then I'll work my way in and try to see if there's anything going on in the shallows mid morning, and then I'll go back out to the deep again and try that, and
Yeah.
keep working those deep areas, because those are areas those big fish would have then slid back off into. It's you know I think the other question I think I would have for you, and is when you go out pike fishing, what gear are you using? What gear would you suggest these people to use? That's
Yeah. So that's another like kayak limitation, right? So there's a lot of guys, and myself included, when you first get started in kayak, you hear all these people say, "Hey, don't get any rods over like a 7 foot because you're in a kayak, especially like a jerk bait. You're going to be throwing your water, your line's going to, or your rod tip's going to be in the water. It is more cumbersome." Um, I used to crappie fish out of kayaks. That's really coming from the Midwest. I had like spider rigs going on in my kayak, and
oh geez.
I had three 10 foot rods out there, um, you know, going for these things, and it worked great, until you double up or triple up, and then it's a pain in the ass. But I will say that that is something like a myth that now I don't really listen to that. I don't know if I would have a 9 foot rod that I'm casting on a kayak, especially with the winds out there,
Yeah.
which maybe would be like a good discussion for us to have offline. I definitely want to come up to the shop. So maybe we talk about that and kind of look at like what that looks like. But I do agree, like a medium heavy, yeah, you can catch them on a medium. I've
Yeah.
caught pike on a medium moderate. But when like we were talking about, if you snag into that trophy fish, that thing's going to be on that line for a long time.
Yeah.
Uh,
What size? Like, I guess the other question I would have is what size braid are you? I assume you're using braid, right? What size
yeah.
braid are you using?
So braid, I'm doing almost like a frog setup. So I'll do like a 50-pound braid, kind of like a frog setup. We do a lot of trolling in the club, so guys will downsize quite a bit on their braid, um,
So I think your
because
guys
they're
really need.
trolling.
I think your guys really need to check out the. I'm the only guy in the state selling it. I know everybody has their own preference on braid, but this stuff is absolutely the bee's knees. It's taking over the muskie world right now, but it's called Finn's braid. I got introduced to them at the Wisconsin Muskie Expo this March, and I absolutely fell in love with them. Um, their 25-pound braid is equivalent in size to 4-pound mono.
Jeez.
Their their 100-pound braid is equivalent in size to 12-pound mono. Their ice braid doesn't freeze down to -50.
Jeez.
They're We're talking the most insane freaking braid possible. It's made in Erlanger, Kentucky. They used to actually make spider wire back in the day.
Okay.
But a bunch of companies were buying through them and rebranding, and a lot of those companies went overseas. Well, the factories are still here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
so they went out of business. Buddies of mine, they bought the business, revamped it, brought a bunch of new models to it, rebranded it, and now that's what it is today. It's Finn's Braid. It's a
Hmm.
fantastic line, honestly. Like they make their 40G is what their slick model is, so it's kind of like this. It has like the same feel of like this Power Pro V2,
The slick, yeah.
and I like the Power Pro V2. It's a great line. It realistically
Yep.
is. But the 40G, in my opinion, is much better. It's thinner. Its castability is a lot better. And that's the other thing. Being able to downsize in your thickness, not only are you getting more depth, less visibility, your
Sensitivity.
castability is insane. I
Yeah.
casted a half-ounce weight with that 25-pound, and I promise you, like I was casting across parking lots, just little whip, nothing.
Yeah.
It was nothing. And like you said, downsizing your braid when you're trolling is a great option.
Yeah.
Um, but it's braid floats though. That's where it kind of just like mono has lift. So honestly, if you're really trying to get down there, you probably should be trolling with fluorocarbon, I would assume. But that's near here or there half a dozen. Like it's really just up to the eye of the beholder on that one, or what they choose to throw. I
Yeah.
personally just like fins. I'm not partial to them just because I sell in my
Hmm.
shop. I loved them so much I brought them into the shop. It is they're just that awesome. But it's something that I think that if you could take advantage of that, use the same poundage you used before, but now you're using thinner. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
it really the fish are more up to bite. You're less intrusive. You're moving less water with your braid with your line itself. It's a really cool thing to start playing around with. Your baits work better. Your baits have a better action, and that is a really really cool thing to do. But yeah, man. I mean, I think if I being in this industry, the being cougar baits, that type of thing. I've met so many really cool bait builders in the state, and some of the guys, the way that they think is just insane. It's insanely
Yeah.
cool. It's really awesome. And I don't know if you tinker around with making your own baits, do you?
Yeah. So I got into this a lot more last year, and I've actually, um, with Jeremy, I know he was up at your shop. We've been tinkering around with some different chatterbaits and some different things that we've been trying to make as well. So it's a blast, man.
Yeah, Adam and I, we had a mold made all the way out in the Ukraine for my chatterbaits,
Nice.
and so because my chatterbait, I couldn't find a chatterbait head online that would hold up to pike. They would
Yeah.
basically the eyelet would snap in my prototypes.
Yep.
So now our the one we've settled on, which is this, it's actually musky wire. So that's point 0.5, what is it, 0.501 or 0.51 wire. It's fairly thick, and that's secured around the eyelet into the lead of the eyelet of the hook, which is then encased in lead. And it's musky wire. It's heavy duty stuff
That's cool.
that we had that custom made, and it's been absolutely dynamite. It's something that you know, um, tinkering with baits is so much fun. It's something that I think that even if you don't want to sell baits, tinker with them. Do the cool, like you could do. I mean, I don't have one to show you. Oh, I do. So, well, I'll just demonstrate. It doesn't have the things. This is a Muskie Innovation Swimming Dog, right? This
Yeah.
is a small muskie bait, by the way, right? So, what I do is I hang bell sinkers off the front hook most of the time. The eyelet, I'll hang bell sinkers. So you're fishing, you can get this thing down deeper for longer. What some other people do is they'll put a hook off the eyelet of the bait
Hmm.
because fish headhunt a lot. or they'll hit it on the fall and headhunt. So it's little thing. I feel like the muskie world. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay anybody else, but I feel like the muskie world, in a lot of ways, they they make their baits designed to be tinkered with. That, or just people that are such characters in the musky fishing world that that's what they do, because
Yeah.
we're fishing for the fish of 10,000 casts. So any little thing to help give you that edge, you're going to do.
Yep.
And so, like, even with our prop style baits, this is something that bass fishermen need to really think about doing. Um, Tune your freaking your tail baits, your like your whopper plopper style baits. If you have a
Yep.
metal tail, tune them. What are you doing throwing them out of the package? That's not
Yep.
okay. Don't do that. Make your baits make noise. Make them sound different. Make them like that's something that to really think about when you're talking about bait making and tinkering with stuff. That's something to really set yourself apart. Add blades to your crankbaits. For the love of God, add blades to your freaking jerk baits. You know, um, it's something that, if you don't do those things, you're really just kind of limiting yourself to what the manufacturer gives you. And
Yep.
that bait actually has so much potential to it that if you just did little tweaks to them, you could really see what that does. Just like that bucktail I showed you earlier that was all bent. If
Yep.
you bend a bucktail like that, it makes that blade work harder. It makes a crazy thump in the water. So it's, or you do the offset blades, the staggers that makes the bait, go all over the place.
Yeah.
And little tweaks. I feel like the muskie world has really kind of figured that out faster than a lot of the other industries, that I feel like if people would kind of, it's, reverse engineer for theirs, like I did with the trout spinner. I reverse engineered a muskie bait style for
Yeah.
trout, and it's been absolutely dynamite.
It's
So
awesome.
just little things to think about. I'm sorry I've kept you here way past longer, almost 3 times longer than you wanted me to.
No, it's good. There's so much information here. So
it's
guys are
and
gonna
I
love it.
honestly I just go on rants, to be honest, or rambles, and I will just talk your ear off about a topic. It's something that, coming from a bait maker, someone that is competitive was a competitive fisherman, a bait maker, tackle shop owner, and tournament director, right? Like, I'm so encased in the industry nowadays,
Yeah.
at least in this area. Um, it's I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I wouldn't do this if I didn't believe that we could improve the sport in so many different ways. I wouldn't do it if I believed it was unnecessary. I think that we have such an awesome populate or like community. I was almost a population community of people out here that that are willing to support small businesses. Without people like your club members,
Yeah.
without people that would support me at ice fishing show or tournaments, or at the Shields Ice Fest, or without any of the awesome people of Colorado that have helped me get here, it wouldn't be possible, and I'm ever thankful for that. Those people, they really, really helped me out. And for the people that are wanting to, see my baits in action, definitely check out, the Burn and Eights YouTube channel. They're going to be filming with Rich Reinhardt this summer. He's already debuted a couple of baits on their YouTube as well. Rich Reinhardt, definitely look up him on YouTube. It's something you won't not learn something.
Yeah.
Jason was at Smith's Fishing. He does a lot. Definitely for people that are interested in tuning baits, learning how to tune baits, you have to check out these YouTube channels. It is so informative. It's not even
Yeah.
funny. You have to listen to what these people have to say. You will learn something. I promise you. Whether it be for, yes, it's musky fishing, but I promise you, you can, take that
Sure.
information and put it toward and reverse it into something else. Definitely look at Burn and Eights and Jason or sorry, Smith's Fishing Outdoors, and Angling Anarchy. holy crap, that guy's adjacent or Brian Scaife. He's a wealth of knowledge too. There's these, yes, these are just YouTubers, but there's other guys out there that are using my baits that that they have full blown
Yeah.
TV shows, right, that are helping me out, and it's without the fishing community, I wouldn't be here. So I'm ever so thankful that these people in the state at least support small business, because in Ohio it wasn't like that. People were not supportive of small businesses. They just were, they almost hated the fact that you were trying to do something. So here in Colorado, people are at least appreciative of that. They appreciate quality. They like the boutique factor of it. They like the customization of it.
Yeah.
They're really awesome people. So for those of you that are listening, that have listened to me ramble for literally almost 2 hours now, you know, I really greatly appreciate it, and please keep, you know, looking at what we come up with throughout the years, because we're not done designing, we're not done innovating. I have so much more to bring to the community, and for the people that do use my baits, if you do catch a fish with my lures, I give out discounts. Like, I give people discount codes
Yeah.
for if you send me a pic. Like, what's bananas to me is how many baits I've sold in the last few years and nobody sends pictures. Like, it's almost impossible to get a picture from somebody with the lure in its mouth, because they think I'm not going to like blur out the background, or they think I'm just going to
Oh
blow it
yeah.
up. And it's like, dude, I'm not going to do that. Just let me
Yeah.
give me the picture so I can publicize that they're actually keep my social media fresh. It's more of like a bragging board than anything.
Oh yeah,
I
dude.
I think that's what I if I was to get my plan with my website was to have a bragging board section on it, but I don't get enough pictures from people to even start it. Nobody sends
Yeah.
me any pictures. People love to tell me they catch fish on my baits, but where are the pictures? Where are the
Yeah.
pictures? They don't exist. That's where.
Yeah.
That's where they're at. They don't exist. Nobody's sending pictures. And that's their prerogative to do so. But gosh darn, I'd love to see some pictures. But it's you know, I thank you guys for letting me be a sponsor. And I hope that I can continue doing that for years to come. Obviously, now I have a lot more on my plate with the tackle shop. But definitely any of you, you know, was it Colorado Kayak Fishing Club? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. All of you guys are more than welcome in my shop anytime. We'll definitely point you in the right direction, and make sure you get on the water with the right gear that you need for the right day. And again, you know, if you need any advice on muskie and pike stuff and where to go and where do you even start. I may not have all of the knowledge. I may not have everything you may need, but I could at least point you in the right direction of where you got to be for the day. So, I mean, I think that we really needed something like this in the area for my shop, the Tackle Shack. We not just the area, but in the state, we really needed this. For those of you that are going out and chasing big fish, please keep them wet. Please fight them. Make the fight quick and easy. Release them with style, and use adequate gear. I think that's the gist of everything we were talking about.
Yeah.
Use adequate gear. Get the adequate knowledge. Don't go into this blind and thinking that everything's going to be okay, because it will seem like it, but it's not going to be in the long run. And ignorance is not bliss. Make sure that you do the right things. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on. And if you ever want someone to babble on for another 2 hours, I'm more than happy to come back on and talk about other things. Especially like if you want to do an ice fishing show in the winter, more than
Dude, that'd
happy
be
to do
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
More than happy to
No,
talk about ice. That's something that I don't know of how many of your kayak fishermen like to do that,
I
but
think one of our guys won. What was the tournament? Ronnie Romero. A bunch of them go up every year, but he had a, giant Laker. I think it was Big Fish. One of the bigger tournaments up there.
so the Three Lakes tournament, right?
Okay, that might have
I
been
think
it.
I think so. I think so,
Yeah,
right?
it's that sounds right.
So that's where I originally met Ronnie.
Okay.
And so was the Three Lakes tournament, because that was the original tournament that got my business off the ground. It
Nice.
was back in the day, or not back in the day, I would say 5 years ago, you were allowed to just go. They used to have this thing called the Village out there, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it,
Mm-mm.
but they would have this guy would get a huge sponsor, the National Ice Fishing Association, and they would build a little town, the Village, out there with street signs and everything, and a big old fire pit in the middle, and he'd give away free food for everybody. It was awesome. But all the
Wow.
vendors had to pay a little bit or whatever to, set up. I mean, nothing much, but
Sure.
they could sometimes, even for me, it was free because it was my first time. And so when I walked, I was unloading my truck. I got recognized, and a guy goes, "What do you have in white hair jigs?" I was like, "What do you mean? What do I have in white hair jigs?" He goes, "Well, what do you have?" And I was like, "Well, I got 16th ounce, 8th ounce, quarter ounce, half ounce, ounce, ounce and a
Sure.
half, 3/4 ounce." He goes, "I'll take out all." And I was like, "What? What do you mean you'll take it all? Like, do you understand how many I have?" He goes, "I don't give a damn. I want them all." So I sold probably 30 baits before I even hit the ice. I hadn't even set up.
Jeez.
I get down to the ice, the ice. He starts telling all his buddies. I put out my sign. And this is when I was doing tying videos. And I got really popular for doing tying videos. And I wasn't even teaching people how to tie. I was just sitting on live stream, just tying and drinking beer. Like, that's all I was doing. And and people
Yeah.
loved it. And for good reason. We just had a good time hanging out, talking, fishing. And it was a spot for the community to get on there and say, "Hey, man, we're catching them here doing this. We're catching them on that bait. That's a cool bait right there." I would take orders on live stream, and so like
Yeah.
people would, jump on all the time for that. And it was regular. I'd do it 2 to 3 times a week. And that's how I really got my business off the ground, by doing that. And, I would go to this Three Lakes Ice Derby, or Three Lakes Ice Tournament. And, I didn't stop tying white 1/8 and quarter ounce hair jigs for 3 days. And when I mean
Jeez.
I didn't stop, I had people outside my booth, and I'm just fucking just whipping them up as fast as I can. I was like, "These don't have glue on them. Like, they're gonna fall apart. I don't have I don't have electricity down here to put UV on anything. Like,
Yeah.
so if you want them, I'll sell them to you at a discount. So instead of charging $8 for them, they were $6, and I
Yeah.
was just throwing them out. Like, I would go back to my buddy's house at nighttime, and I would tie till about 1 in the morning. Wake up at 4 to get out to the ice. Like, it was absolutely mayhem for 3 days. No sleep. I wasn't able to go to get lunch. I had to bring lunch with me because I did not stop tying white hair jigs for 3 gosh darn days. And it
Jeez.
was. I walked at $6 a pop. I walked away with probably $1,400. And so, like, I mean, I'm not kidding you, and just straight cash. And I was like, "Dude, this is what I needed to really get the business off the ground." And that's where I started really meeting people, was at that tournament, because it was a really boutique style that people really, appreciated.
Yeah.
But at tournaments, there wasn't anybody doing that. Nobody was showing up and selling baits right then and there. There was no tackle stores doing that. They kind of just, I don't want to say nobody was doing it, but it didn't seem like anyone was doing it. I mean, people looked at me like, "What are you doing here?" You know?
Yeah.
And so it's same thing with the tying videos. People were just like, "What are you doing?" And there was nothing on Facebook like that at the time. I was the only guy doing it, and it was pretty cool, man. I mean, until all of a sudden there was just rules against it. Like, that's why I stopped doing videos, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden I started getting kicked off all the pages. I started, all of a sudden, Three Lakes tournament was trying to charge me like almost $2,000 to set up a booth. I'm
Wow.
not, so I'm not doing this. I'm not going to be there. Like, I'm not going to do that. Unfortunately, your customers are going to suffer, but that's just the case. I'm not going to go and pay you all of my salary for the time to be there. Like, that's not worth
Yeah.
it. And so I'm unfortunately your customers or your clientele is going to suffer because of that. But there's, it was a really cool run, getting it started. And
Yeah.
I traveled for I did probably that first year I probably did 4 tournaments. It was
Yeah.
and it was in that, and once those tournaments start, they domino. So it's a whole month of you're you're going to build all week, and then you're going to go to a tournament on that Saturday, and you're going to sell out, make baits the whole time, sell out baits there. Then you're going to go home. You're going to build baits all week, go to the tournament on Saturday, and and
Gosh.
sell everything you own. I did that for a whole month throughout the winter for a few years before there started to be regulations on that, right? Everybody wanted their piece of the pie, right? So it's
Yeah.
now I now run a tournament, and I don't ask for any piece of the pie but a donation, right? For giveaways. And so for me, the best way to get around rules was to just start my own or
Yeah.
become the director of such. And so I don't, and I try to get vendors to come to my tournament. I try to get, like, we had, was it Jason Alzano or whatever from 13 Fishing? He came and set up like a whole 13 Fishing setup.
Cool.
We donated $1,000 to my buddy's veterans charity that helps vets transition back to society after deployment.
Right on.
Or and that's not a ton of money, but that's enough to help somebody out. you know
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's in my opinion, that's more important than any bait sold, is what you get out of it, not just yourself but the community. And in this case, it's our soldiers are coming back with no help. And whether I know a bunch of my buddies, one of them, he even calls himself Peg Leg. He's the guy's leg blown off in Afghanistan. Well, I met him through this charity, but he like, people like him get help from this charity, that that $1,000 goes and helps pay his, whether it be medical bills or pays for a cup of coffee for him, like
Yeah, man.
whatever it may be. It really helps these guys out. So I don't know if you guys donate to any charities?
Yeah. So each year, we have a different charity. This year, we're working with Gene Campbell. He runs True Patriot Outfitters, and basically, he takes the funds and then uses that to find veterans, first responders, and he takes them and their families on guided kayak fishing trips. So it's really cool. He's in Colorado, so he's been doing a lot of cool stuff. Boys and Girls Club's another one. The first year, I think we gave like $700, and then last year was our 10-year anniversary, and we gave $7,500 to the
Wow.
same charity. So it's really cool. Like, so completely get it. That's like why we do it. We're a nonprofit, and like having sponsors like you just helps us boost that even more. So we really do appreciate, you supporting the club as well, guys. If you are uh, fishing spinny 11 mile, getting up there, or hey, if you just want to talk to Max and learn a little more about pike fishing, or see the baits in person, highly encourage you to get out to Buena Vista, um, to your shop there. I got to come out now, man. I'm pumped about it. So I'll be
Yep.
out there. What's another way to just find you guys on social media? I know you got your
So
website and everything.
I am on Facebook. Like, so I don't have a website for the tackle shop yet.
Okay.
I do for Cougarbaits, which is cougarbaitsfishandlures.com. I want to say, if I remember right, my Tackle Shack Instagram is Tackle Shack LLC. My Cougarbaits Instagram is Cougarbaits LLC. And then I want to say, if I remember, I can't. I want to say my Facebook is just Tackle Shack, honestly.
Okay.
But it's in Buena Vista, Colorado. We are right across the street from Sold Out Tees, right off Main Street in downtown Buena Vista. So,
Awesome.
Yep, I appreciate you having me on, man. And I'm sure everyone here is ready to go to bed after listening to me ramble for the past 2 hours. So thank you for putting up with me for the evening, and I look forward to seeing you in the shop, man.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yep. See you later.
Yep.